What is going on, everybody? We are here, the final
We've
episode,
made it.
the top 70 of the 70s. This is the top five, and we have a very special guest to celebrate this with. The man himself, the myth, the legend, Giggins is here. This is so exciting, man. What an awesome channel this guy has. You should check it out immediately. So many awesome album reviews and so much more. His content is so thoughtful, and I can't wait to get into these discussions today.
And if
Thanks
you
for
want
having
any
me, man.
news on the Beach Boys, go straight to his channel. I'm
Oh.
telling you.
Seriously. Yeah.
Stoked to be here, guys. Stoked to be here. So cool.
Well, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into this at number 5.
Who's Next by The Who? I mean, come on. This, I think, is the greatest hard rock album of all time. Absolute bangers from top to bottom. And such an interesting story how this album came to be, because obviously Pete Townsend was trying to do the Lifehouse project, and which was really like way more ambitious than even Tommy. And like, I guess there was like one point where he wanted to like put microphones in the crowd, so they were like interacting with him on the album. And then I guess he kind of had like this mental breakdown and things weren't really coming together, so he had to scrap the project. But the best thing about it, I think this is where Pete Townsend was at his absolute best when it came to songwriting, when it came to hooks. And obviously the band at their absolute best, just in general. I mean, you don't get a stronger 4-piece unit than you get with the playing and performing on here from Roger Daltrey, Pete Townsend, Keith Moon, and John Entwistle. It's just absolutely insane. Just opening with that opening track, Baba O'Reilly, with the you hear that synth line, you immediately know it, and then Roger Daltrey comes in, out here in the fields, you know, and it's just, oh my goodness, it just explodes out of the speakers. And Moon's manic drumming as always, and then of course the I think it's like a violin solo near the end. It's just absolutely incredible. This song, one of the most classic songs, you know, that proclamation, that teenage wasteland, you know, it's like one of the greatest rock songs of all time. And it's not even my favorite song on the album. I think Bargain is even better. That's like one of my favorite Who songs. And I think, oh my goodness, Moon's drumming on this is just in another stratosphere. Just like, especially that drum song, like the fills he's doing, and then he's just going completely crazy on the kit. And there's actually this great video. Well, actually, no, I think that's for another song, but I'll get into it. But this song is just amazing. And of course, you know, that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful bridge where Pete Townsend, I said, looking round, I look at my face in the mirror. I know I'm worth nothing. And then you get that amazing John Entwistle bass line underneath, which is just so melodic, so prolific when it comes to just the execution of it. Amazing, beautiful ballad. Some of Roger's best vocals, which aren't even his best on this album. Love Ain't for Keeping, a very simple song, but really just so beautiful with Pete playing acoustic on this one. You know, just really one of their very simple ballads. It's just so great. And then of course you have the only song that wasn't written by Pete Townsend and not a part of the Lifehouse project, which was My Wife, from John Entwistle, which is just absolutely hysterical. You know, this night out on the town, his wife thinks he's cheating on her, so he's like, he has to get a judo expert with a machine gun. I mean, it's just so much fun, this song. And then of course songs like The Song Is Over is just another great Pete Townsend ballad, with him singing on the verses, and obviously Daltrey on the chorus. And then that goes right into another great ballad on the second side, Getting in Tune, which not only just kind of like synthesizes you know, the beauty of music and the technical progression of it, with something that's very personal and very heartfelt. Going Mobile probably is my least favorite song on here, but what does that sing? It's still a really, really good track. And I just love when he goes beep beep, he's like driving the mobile home. It's just so funny. And then of course Behind Blue Eyes, famously covered by Limp Bizkit, but still just but man, I mean, come on, this is one of those songs when I heard it, that no one knows what it's like to be the bad man. I was like, oh, that's the Who. I never knew. But just one of Pete Townshend's best songs lyrically, you know, like stick, you know, if I swallow anything evil, stick your fingers down my throat. If I smile, give me some bad news, you know. It's just so brilliant. And this was the video I was talking about, where Roger Daltrey, he's just listening to the Keith Moon drum track on it, and he's just getting so giddy and excited, like all these years after it was recorded. It's just such a beautiful moment, and it just shows you how much they appreciated each other as musicians. But to me, the coup de grace of not just this album, but the Who's entire career is Won't Get Fooled Again, which is like maybe the greatest rock song of all time. And of course that intro is just so amazing as well. And then you get Roger coming in, we'll be fighting in the streets with our children at our feet. You know, just kind of like the whole song being about, you know, the rise of this power, you know, saying we won't get fooled again, trying to overthrow it. And then eventually, you know, they say same as the new boss, same as the old boss sort of thing. But the thing that really makes a song warrant its 8.5 minute runtime is just not only Roger Daltrey's vocals, which like this song makes him the rock god, as far as I'm concerned. When he screams once, and then you get an amazing Keith Moon drum solo. And then when he goes, yeah, it's just like, oh my, that is the peak of rock and roll right there, as far as I'm concerned. And I just saw the Who in concert a couple months ago. He can still hit that note at 78 years old. It's just
unreal,
absolutely insane. And the crowd goes crazy, obviously. But I think it is like just their magnum opus. And really this, honestly, this should be in the top 5. I had it probably at number 4. So honestly, this is a perfect spot for this. As you know, the Who is one of my favorite bands. And I think, believe it or not, I didn't love this album originally. I really, really liked it. But this is probably the album that has grown the most on me out of any I've ever listened to. And just outside of my top 10 of all time, this is one of the greatest records ever recorded.
Yeah. I mean, and you said it all, man. But yeah, the Who definitely grows on you over time. I think Baba O'Reilly, you know, I was instantly hooked to that song. And I think that's one of the greatest album openers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And definitely, as you said, one of the greatest album closers of all time. And yeah, there's really not a weak track on here. Getting in Tune is another favorite of mine. I just love the way that song builds, and Daltrey, again, his vocal performance when he's doing the riding on you. So cool, man. And those chord progressions on the piano are so brilliant. But man, I don't know what else you can say. Giggens, what do you think about this placing?
It's one of my favorite albums of all time. This album is just ingrained in my DNA, and I always think of this album contextually, because like when Baba O'Reilly came out, like having a song with a long synth intro like that was unheard of at the time. It's such a new thing we take for granted now, but it was definitely striking new ground. A lot of this album was really, but yeah, the making of this album was like a real up and down, real touch and go. They did a lot in New York, a lot in England. Their managers were on drugs. They were having a really hard time getting things together. Pete was trying to explain this story that made zero sense. He basically invented the internet. It's a wacky sort of story. And the cool thing about like Behind Blue Eyes, it's from the point of view of the villain story. You know, Bargain's about like a spiritual sort of feeling, you know, being one with the spirit. You know, it's a really far out sort of album, but it makes this sort of proggy rock 70s feel together to create a really unique sound. The production on that album is fantastic.
Oh, amazing. One of the best albums of all time. Hands
down, man. But yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys. Getting in Tune is one of my absolute favorite songs ever by them. There's such a cool, I just love that maybe with you in the background. They nail those moments so good. They don't have a whole lot of moments like that vocally on any of their songs. So to hear them do something like that is kind of far out. But yeah, top 5, hands down, man. That was one of the first albums I ever bought on vinyl when I was like 14 or 13 or something. This would have been, you know, 80 years ago when I started buying records. But it was
such an iconic album cover too.
Oh,
I mean,
so the pissing on the
taking a leak on the album list. Yeah, why not? You know, all right, good, you got it. Let's go.
Exactly.
Right, that's a wrap.
Classic, man. Yeah, so glad that it made it this high on the list, man. I had a feeling that it would, but yeah, top 5, absolutely. and maybe could have even been higher, but
yeah, I agree.
we will see what's next. So now at number 4, Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, 1975. Such a classic album. Only 5 tracks, but still full album length worth of material. And just from the opening track alone, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, I believe 10 plus minutes long, but every second of it is compelling just from those opening synth sounds. And then, you're slowly building this just strange, like, space kind of guitar riff is the best way I can describe it, by David Gilmour. And it's got everything to love about Pink Floyd in one song: the bluesiness, the spaciness. The whole album has this thematic, basically this theme written about Syd Barrett, who essentially started the band and pretty much lost his mind and had to leave the band, and Gilmour came in, and that is where the whole Wish You Were Here, the song, the album title, came from. And I think it's one of the most beautiful songs that Waters and Gilmour ever wrote together, and probably one of the songs that they really wrote together as a unit, most, both lyrically and musically. And just, one of the most iconic guitar riffs, starting it off, that acoustic doom 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 doom. And just absolutely, just for that song alone, I think it is worth being in the top 10. Definitely this deserves to be in the top 5 as well. Of course, you have a Cigar, which is another brilliant tune about, if there is kind of a story to this album, it's about the band themselves and what they went through. And that's kind of telling the story of them dealing with these record executives, come in here, dear boy, have a cigar, you're gonna go far. And of course, this was actually not sung by either Gilmour or Waters. It was famously by Roy Harper, who sounds kind of similar to the both of them. So so I didn't know that for many years. But Welcome to the Machine, of course, another song that's just like, very depressing, but the whole concept of, just welcome to this machine that is life, this adulthood, if you will, or you could look at it many different ways, but this album just works on so many different levels. And I even love the outro of the other Shine On You Crazy Diamond parts. I think it's like 6 through 9 or whatever the numbers are, I forget. Just it's so good all the way through, and I love that it's here.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, John, I think really what I take this album as, and I think its intent was to kind of be not only a kind of criticism of the music industry, especially with songs like Welcome to the Machine, those droning synths coming in and kind of like sounding very conglomerate, very autonomized, but just kind of like how they became a part of the cog in the music industry, and kind of like how Syd Barrett was a casualty of said machine, and just so sad, like how that occurred. Obviously, part of it was self-inflicted, but obviously the fame wasn't necessarily something he was, kind of clamoring for. But yeah, I just absolutely love that they executed this. It really is such a beautiful tribute and one of the greatest concept albums of all time. I mean, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, parts 1 through 5 might even be my favorite Pink Floyd song of all time, because just the way it builds, and obviously you see it's an anagram with the Shine On You Crazy Diamond saying Sid, which is just so brilliant in its own right. But just the way when David Gilmour gets to that guitar, so that down, 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 like I lose my mind every single time I hear. One of the greatest moments in Pink Floyd's entire discography, maybe in their entire career, just in general, that one moment. But the way they fuse these jazz elements into prog, it's just the saxophones come in, it's amazing. I mean, everything about this. Have a Cigar, as you said, is a great, maybe one of the most critical songs with a Welcome to the Machine, where he's basically saying, I just think the band's fantastic. By the way, which one's pink? I just love that line. It's just how they kind of see him as a commodity and not necessarily individual human beings. But Wish You Were Here obviously is just one of their most beautiful songs. And I just love the stereo on it, where you hear the TV in one ear and then you tune in and then you hear Gilmore's guitar, and then eventually obviously the song fleshes itself out. And just it was actually on when I walked into a doctor's office the other day. I was like, oh yeah, I wish you were here, Zon. I got so excited. I think the last few parts of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, 6 through 9, I think goes on a little bit too long, but I still love it overall. So I mean, come on, what can you say about this album besides obviously the most famous story about it, and really one of the ones where just the stars aligned so perfectly and so tragically, is when Syd Barrett went into the studio and nobody knew who he was. He was like this bald shaven guy, stocky, had a toothbrush. He kept brushing his teeth in the corner or something. And then finally I think it was Richard Wright who found out, like, he realizes, like, do you know who that is? And it's like, that's Syd. And just so sad to hear, like, that Roger and David, who knew him the longest, started breaking down and crying, because it was such, like, to see their old friend in that way, and then just to chat for him for a little bit and then to never see him again. I mean, it's just one of those stories. It's like he had to be there when they were recording Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I mean, just one of the greatest stories in about recording any album.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. There's definitely a mystique and a magic to Pink Floyd that I think started because of Syd and his storytelling and the sort of atmospheric psychedelic sounds he created, and they disappeared. So the myth was already there to begin with. So the fact that he does show up on the recording sessions for that album is absolutely serendipity, or the universe speaking, whatever you want to call it. It's easily one of my favorite Pink Floyd albums from the 70s. And it was definitely them hitting their stride. After Syd left, they had a couple of rocky albums that weren't rocky, but they're mostly instrumentals. They did a lot of soundtrack work. So by the time Dark Side of the Moon came along, they finally figured out how to write pop songs that connected with an audience that was looking for trippy stuff, but it was digestible. And with Wish You Were Here, they were like on fire at that point. But you're totally right. Like when you hear that, the first, and then you're instantly like, oh yes, so good. And like, I don't care how long the song goes on for, just keep playing it. But then you get to that payoff and a big euphoric, joyous chorus comes in. But yeah, the title track of Wish You Were Here, there's definitely an emotion to that as a fan, you almost feel for them, because you understand and feel sympathetic towards their side of talking about Syd and what happened with him, and really wanted the best for the dude. Because you're right, he really checked out because of the fame. Like, drugs probably didn't help,
and
but
the acid, yeah,
acid probably didn't help out too much. He really just wanted the garden. He didn't want to be a famous dude,
right?
But I mean, they saw him every once in a while after, they bump into him here and there or something, but it wasn't a common thing to see him. But yeah, that story is that's like rock and roll. I don't know what words you want to use, but it's just like, it's one of those moments where it's like, that's rock and roll. Here's the guy we're writing the album about. Poof, here he is, and then he's gone.
And extra beautiful too, like with the history, unfortunately, that would unfold between Gilmore's and Waters down through the line. It was such a beautiful moment. I don't know if you guys saw when they reunited briefly, just for that Live 8 performance in the 2000s.
Watched it on TV, yeah.
When they played this song specifically, it was just like, I almost got teary when it got to that, we're just two lost souls swimming in a fish bowl. It was a beautiful moment. It was like, man, why couldn't they have just kept it going from there, unfortunately? But at least we got that,
Ego. A lot of ego in that band.
Still to this day, might I add.
To this day, very much so to this day, yeah.
Maybe a little more so on the Water side, but let's see.
Probably.
Yeah.
Not Gilmore. Not Gilmore.
Yeah. But yeah, so glad this made the top 5, man. So
good choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a great choice, guys. So now at number 3.
Loving you isn't the right thing.
Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be surprised that this album is this high on this list. This is one of the, as you were saying about Joni Mitchell's Blue, John, I think that this is the greatest breakup album of all time. And a lot of that has to do with the story behind it, because let me tell you, if you guys don't know the story, this is probably the craziest, the best story behind making of an album I've ever heard in my life. Just the fact that Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham, they split that off, and then obviously John McVie and Christine McVie got that divorce, and you have Stevie and Lindsay screaming at each other, I think, and then John and Christy not talking to each other, and then you have Mick Fleetwood who hooked up with Stevie Nicks, and then that was a whole other thing, and then they're all high on cocaine, and it's just like the fact that like there was so much chaos.
Yeah, the fact that this album even exists is pretty amazing.
Right, but somehow out of this they're able to make their absolute best record. Like, oh my goodness, this is one of the best albums from the 70s just in general, and it really does play like a greatest hits album. Like, a lot of these songs are their most well known, but even the songs that don't jump out to you immediately on FM radio are like Secondhand News, which is such a great Lindsey Buckingham track with just amazing guitar playing, and obviously just the I'm just secondhand news, I'm just secondhand news, you know, just kind of his well, I guess one of his attacks is Stevie Nicks, but kind of like kind of trivializing this whole relationship. And then of course you have Dreams, which obviously had its resurgence a couple years ago thanks to skateboards and some juice. But really, this is one of Stevie Nicks' absolute best songs with the band. Might be her single, but well, actually, Landslide's pretty great. But regardless, I mean, everybody knows that the thunder only happens when it's raining. I mean, just one of the greatest hooks of all time. Never Going Back Again. Yet again, it's just the acoustic guitar playing from Lindsey Buckingham. One of the most underrated, but also one of the best guitar players ever. All fingerpicked too, which is just crazy to me. Don't Stop is a great song with Christine McVie and Lindsey Buckingham on vocals. Just so catchy. I've heard that on the radio so many times before I heard this album. Go Your Own Way, obviously, yet again, one of their biggest songs, and one that obviously didn't sit well with Stevie Nicks, that line, shacking up, all that, that's all you want to do, that sort of thing. Kind of a very, very vitriolic attack at her, and a little embittered, obviously, on his part. But obviously that anthemic, you can go your own way. I mean, it's just one of the most iconic soft rock choruses from the 70s. Songbird's also a really beautiful Christine McVie ballad. Obviously, You Make Loving Fun, talking about Christine McVie. I mean, what another great, the fact you had 3 amazing songwriters in this group is really what's puts this album over top, because you get all these different perspectives from all these different relationships. But You Make Loving Fun, I think, is really,
that's a really underrated tune. It's got such a good, like, funky kind of vibe to it. I love that song.
But it also is just, it was like kind of a hit in its own right, very iconic song. And I love how, like, I think John McVie like asked what the song was about. She said it was about their dog, but it was actually about the AM guy in the recording studio that she was having an affair with. Really, really great story. I Don't Want to Know, yet again, another great Stevie Nicks songs with her and Lindsey Buckingham trading off on vocals. But really, I think the absolute masterpiece on this album is The Chain. The fact that all the 5 members get the songwriting credit. And of course, just really, it kind of, everything comes together, all this chaos that is going on. And basically is the perfect description of this band. I could say, We Will Never Break the Chains, which is, a metaphorical thing. And just when they're like screaming, chains keep us together, with an amazing Lindsey Buckingham guitar solo. And obviously that breakdown in the middle from John McVie and Mick Fleetwood that they came up with. I mean, it's literally their ultimate statement. The only thing I think Oh Daddy's all right, and I do like Gold Dust Woman, but I just think compared to how good all the other songs are, I just think it ends a little weakly, but it's still one of the greatest albums of all time. And I'm not upset that it is this high, and I figured it probably would be. See, I got the shirt to prove it. I love this album.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised it's this high, honestly, but then again, I'm not, because so many people love it. And like you were saying about the Who before, Fleetwood Mac is one of those bands that took a while for me to get into. It wasn't until really I had 40, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. So you're way ahead of the curve, my friend.
I guess so, yeah.
But yeah, no, The Chain is unbelievable. Dreams, such a great song. I mean, really, like you said, there's not really. I'm actually not a big fan of the opening track, the Mao
Really?
Mao Mao thing. But the rest of it is, I mean, it's all classics. You can't deny it. And yeah, it's so cool how, everybody in the band does offer something. Lindsey Buckingham, I think, is one of the most underrated guitarists. His solo on Go Your Own Way is just unreal. His acoustic guitar playing, his songwriting for that matter. And yeah, it's deserves to be in the top 5. What can you say?
I can see that for sure. I mean, they definitely took the Mamas and the Papas. I saw her again last night and made an entire album out of it. It's just an album that I think beyond music also represents what a band can go through and still create something that's gonna stand the test of time. So that in itself is nothing short of amazing. That like you can make this album going through everything they've gone through. It would have been like being a Motley Crue or something. It would have been like just every bad thing you could think would happen was happening, and then drugs. So it's like let's just add fire to the fire.
Yeah, I'm amazed there's not a biopic on them yet.
I think someone's writing it, or someone did write it, and it's kind of on the Hollywood blacklist right now. So no one's really kind of touching it to produce it. Which
I look at the rights to that one. No one's gonna want to do that one. Good
I'll
Lord.
do it. I'll do it.
But like that bass line on the chain,
oh yeah,
great bass line.
So good.
But it's an album for me that like personally I wouldn't put in the top 5 for me, but like I can see as like a great 70s record. Sure, hands down. Like it's something that like I think everyone should hear at least once.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna stick in your head. It's definitely a greatest hits album. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I know you're not that big a fan of it, Nathaniel, but Gold Dust Woman, I think, is like a magical song as well, and a great way to end off the album.
Some good Stevie right there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I mean, obviously Stevie Nicks is definitely the highlight of this whole band. I think when it comes vocally, songwriting, she's the one that stands out the most. And I think even though she only has a few songs to her name on this album, I think Dreams alone just tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, great pick, guys. Album. Awesome. So now we are at number 2. Four, aka Zoso by Led Zeppelin from 1971. You knew this was coming, just not sure where it was going to be. So I'm sure now everyone knows what number 1 is, but we'll wait to get to that because we got to park here for a minute. Absolutely one of the best rock records of all time. Like Nathaniel said, Who's Next is his favorite. This is probably my favorite if we're going for all-time hard rock. I mean, from the opener of Black Dog, one of the most iconic guitar riffs of all time. Jimmy Page, of course, as always, the hero throughout this album. On a production level alone, just the fact that he produces their own material and comes up with something as incredible as When the Levee Breaks, like just the sound of John Bonham's drums booming through that stairwell is like, you had me there. But then the song ends up becoming one of the greatest album closers of all time, one of the best blues, again, like Pink Floyd, like a blues space rock jam that has like the harmonica sound on this is incredible. Of course, they're transposing this old song. I can't remember the original writer's name. Maybe you guys
Memphis
know
Minnie.
it. Memphis Minnie, that's it. But they make it their own. I mean, no one else has a song that sounds like this. Like that huge guitar riff, the huge bass. I think John Paul Jones by the end of it is like doing double bass. I could go on and on just about this song, but then of course you've got Stairway to Heaven, their masterpiece, many would say. And I mean, it is a masterpiece just from that opening acoustic riff. You know what it is, you know what you're in for. They're bold enough to have a flute start the song off with it. And then, 7+ minutes, but it just keeps building and building to one of the most iconic guitar solos of all time. And just that A, G to F at the end of that thing. With the Robert Plant, as we wind up down the road. I mean, come on, man. And then Misty Mountain Hop. It's like, where do you go from Stairway to Heaven? And then you put side B on, and you got this like, that's such a cool funked out guitar riff of Misty Mountain Hop that's talking about like full-blown J.R.R. Tolkien stuff. It's like, what are these guys talking about? It's brilliant all the way through. There's not a weak track on here. Going to California, one of the most beautiful ballads of their entire discography. God, man, at rock and roll, as you know, it's kind of like their version of 50s rock, but it's just, you know, with John Bonham on the drums, man, and driving that thing. It's just incredible. These guys, in my opinion, really can do no wrong, and this is them at their best, and deservedly is here.
Well, let me preface this by saying this album was on my list. Okay, let me just put that out there. I do think it's a little overrated in the sense that I don't think, but this is the thing. I love this album. I just don't think it's as consistent as a lot of people feel. At least for me personally, I'm not. I think songs like "The Battle of Evermore" are really cool, but it just doesn't really do much in the way of you know, lyrics. But you know, that's Led Zeppelin.
That's my least favorite as well, but I still think it's still
cool.
Great song.
It's cool.
And the female vocal is so cool on it too.
Right. No, and it's definitely very interesting for Led Zeppelin. So that's the thing. You got the variety going for it. But yeah, I mean, the best songs on here are some of the most iconic rock songs of all time, like that opening of Black Sabbath. Hey, hey, Mars, and the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. I mean, it's just and then I mean,
and the time signature is so weird on that song.
So cool,
but it's still catchy as hell.
And Bonham plays like right in the pocket too. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. Rock and roll, as you said. I mean, it's a song so good that Billy Joel interpolates it into his set. I mean, crazy. He does that with River of Dreams. I think he does it with other songs too. But when I saw him last summer, he interpolated rock and roll, which is great. Cool. And then of course, I mean, I agree with you. Going to California, it was proof that they could still. I know I say the thing about lyrically with Zeppelin, but I think that this is proof that they can write an insanely beautiful heartfelt ballad even before I guess Houses of the Holy with the Rain song. And obviously it was an ode to you know, and was inspired by Joni Mitchell, which makes a lot of sense. But man, what an influence to pull from, let me tell you. Obviously When the Levee Breaks, absolute classic. As you said, I don't think I need to say too much more about that song. But let's be honest, Stairway to Heaven is one of this like top 20 songs of all time. I mean, when in just the way, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the polyphonic video where they break down like the hero's journey. Like it's basically a narrative, a whole narratively structured song about the traditional, you know, kind of like Tolkien-esque journey, which is just so amazing how it builds musically. Of course, that like as you said, that guitar, it's it may be like the greatest guitar opening to any song. I think almost unquestionably. There's probably a few contenders there, but then of course once you get to that almost outro there, I mean, just so amazing. And the lyrics on it too, you know, it's so incredible. And obviously Led Zeppelin's masterpiece, though the album I actually like. I think I said this in the 60s video when we were talking about Led Zeppelin 2. That's actually my favorite Led Zeppelin album. But obviously you got to put this one right near the top because it's unquestionably one of their best, and I can understand why someone would say it's the best Led Zeppelin record. I as much as I say a lot of their records are overrated, I still love the band. I mean, and this is proof of it right here. Though I don't think it should be at number 2. I'm just saying, especially above Who's Next and Blue and Blood on the Tracks and What's Going On and all these albums that it's above. It absolutely deserves a spot on this list, and it's one of the greatest rock albums ever.
Yeah, I can dig that. I mean, for me, it's very overplayed because the radio station back home just murdered it for me. Like, it was just every other song was Stairway to Heaven, and I was like, make it stop. Just please make it stop. So like when I was in high school, I loved this album. I loved Led Zeppelin a lot back then. And my favorites are 1 and 3 probably. I love those albums. But like with this one, Going to California is my favorite song on it because I just like Robert's voice on it. I like when he sings more gentle because he really has a good enunciation. Like, you feel the emotion in his voice. He's really good at that. But yeah, rock and roll, the drums on rock and roll are fantastic. I mean, John Bonham is an unbelievable drummer, but like, if I don't ever have to hear Stairway to Heaven ever again, that would be all right by me, really. You know, bit of a hot take there, but
no, I hear you. That song is definitely overplayed. I wouldn't call it overrated, but overplayed.
Right, yeah. It's a good song. For sure. It's it's an incredible piece of work. And I love that story of when they were in the room together showing how it goes, and John Bonham's waiting there, be like, when do I come in? When do I come in? Like, like, no, you got a few minutes here, just chill. You know, the part that he does come in, it's really cool. The buildup of that song is magical. The storytelling is great. It's expertly played, but I don't ever have to hear it ever again.
Oh, okay. Well, I know what you mean. Probably feel more intense about another song, which I actually kind of hate. Don't Stop Believing, which was so overplayed. I used to love that when I was younger, but now I kind of hate it. So maybe yeah, maybe not that as far as, you know, like probably further than what we were saying about Stairway to Heaven, but you know, obviously respect the merit of it.
I respect the hell out of them. Yeah, I mean, for sure. And like, you know, it is a really good album. I wouldn't have put it in my top 5, but I definitely see why it belongs in the top 5 for sure. I mean, it changed a lot.
So that's interesting. So Nathaniel's favorite is 2. Yours is either 1 or 3, and mine is 4. So that's cool. But yeah, I mean, so many great ones. Like we already discussed, Physical Graffiti, and you know, that's funny you say that about Stairway. It's like I felt the same way at some point about rock radio. Like they'd overplay Black Dog and Rock and Roll too, for that matter. It's like, where's Kashmir and like all these other great songs in their catalog? It's like, you know, space them out a little bit, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, absolutely a classic. And now we're at number 1.
So, Giggens.
Yes.
You know, you have a guess of what number 1 is?
I have to say Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
The shirt says it all.
Yes, the shirt and the wall.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you knew it had to be this. I would have been shocked if it wasn't. And I think that this won by a large margin as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so beloved. I mean, you know, what is there to say? I mean, I know I've talked about this album so many times on my own channel that I'm like, I don't even know what to say anymore. So Giggens, you start off on this one, man.
Man, this album changed everything for that band. Everything. They were making money for the first time. They had people coming to the shows. Like, they really figured out how to write pop songs. But like I said, make them weird and proggy, but digestible. So it was just weird enough that everyone was like, did you hear this thing? I mean, that album sold like crazy. It still sells like crazy. It's still one of the best-selling records every year that it gets reissued. But like musically, it's incredible. I mean, it takes you on a journey. There's sound effects. There's weird stuff in the background. There's apparently things that you hear if you're going to die. There's like this weird mystery stuff on this album. And it's just one of those journeys that it takes you on that you never forget. It's one of those albums where you put it on, it's something you'll experience and it sticks with you forever. I don't know what they put in those grooves, man, but something stuck, and it's worthy of a number one status. Absolutely.
Yeah. And one of those few concept albums that, like, even though it's very broad, the concepts that they're talking about, it just works so well, especially the order, the sequence of the songs, you know, where they're starting just about, you know, breath and life, and then, you know, they're these weird synthesizer noise and a plane crash and whatever, and then you're into time and just talking about the time in your life or the lack thereof, and some really truly dark, depressing lyrics when you think about it. But then of course getting into money and
cash
religion and war and like all these huge larger than life themes, but it just hits you on such a visceral level, I think, lyrically. You know, even though there's some really poignant things on the wall, I don't think Roger Waters' songwriting has ever been better on here. It's so universal, and the music is so universal. You know, just like we were talking about on Wish You Were Here, where they're mixing blues with space rock. And here I think it's even more soulful, and maybe that has a lot to do with the background singers and the saxophone work by Dick Perry. Great Gig in the Sky. I can never remember her name. Chloe. Her vocal is
Claire Torrey. Yeah.
Claire Torrey. It's unbelievable what she does on that
One
song.
of the greatest vocalist performance of all time, really.
Yeah.
And I just want to preface this by saying that I am generally not a huge fan of prog music. I find a lot of it gets a little too meandering, a little too pretentious. But I think you guys probably know my thoughts on Floyd by what I've said on the series so far. And you guys should have known this was going to be number one. It was number one on Johnny Radio's top 100 albums. It was number two on my top 100 albums, the highest ranking entry from the 70s. And I couldn't be happier this number one. This was my number one of the 70s. So once again, you had Abbey Road at number one and Dark Side of the Moon, my two favorite albums, both made number one in their respective decades. So I'm on a roll right now. But really, how and trust me, I know people who don't love this album.
Oh yeah.
But how can you not? I mean, this is literally so beyond brilliant. Just the musical cohesion of it all, but also just the fact that musically they pushed rock music into a whole other like playing field. I mean, just a whole other existential plane of existence. I don't know. Just the way they fuse like these long extended segments of music with influences of jazz, these weird sound effects, synthesizers, everything we kind of already went over. And really, this is just amazing because obviously we talked about Syd Barrett. They had a few rough years, maybe you could say. But this is where Roger Waters really hit his stride. And not just him, because you have contributions from Gilmour and Richard Wright. I mean, you have so many from all different members of the band. But what is so amazing about this album is how he's able to hit on themes of like life kind of passing you by, what death means, really primal urges of evil and greed, like money, with that cash register, which is one of the most unique pieces of instrumentation on any song. And then of course that like David Gilmour's guitar playing on this whole album is absolutely nuts, and I think really proved his emergence of one of the greatest guitarists of all time. But just from just how this album is basically, it signifies a life, and it all comes full circle, starting with Speak to Me with that heartbeat, and then you go into Breathe in the Air, which is just that that beautiful slide riff from David Gilmour. And then, oh my goodness, his vocals on are incredible. And On the Run, the paranoia that Roger Waters feels from Flying Planes goes perfectly right into the time, which I'll be honest, whenever I hear those alarm clocks, it scares the shit out of me. One of the scariest songs. And then
you never know exactly when it's going to hit.
Yeah.
And you're like,
you're
it's
just
coming.
Waiting.
Done on purpose. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's to such great effect. And then Great Gig in the Skies. Oh my goodness. It's like so many of their best songs. And just the way like she's like, just, like doing that. And it feels like this is like a soul, like leaving the body and someone trying to have to come to terms with their death, because obviously it settles down later in the song, and that is the acceptance of you kind of like, I'm moving out of this world, I'm just going to let it be and move on to my next life. It's just so beautiful, so powerful, and she doesn't get her just due, I don't think.
Obviously really, I couldn't even remember her name, so
exactly. And that's the thing. Well, you could blame that on Waters or whoever, but Us and Them is like probably top 3 Floyd songs of all time, and in so many different ways you can interpret it. Us and Them, are we against some kind of authoritarian figure, or are we against the government leaders? Because after all, we're only ordinary men. It's just so many, very, very interesting statements. And also, I just love how subversive the chord progression is on this, how spacious it is, because it really draws you into its sonic landscape, which is basically this whole album. There's a reason people smoke to this and kind of like get brought into another dimension.
Laser light shows would never be the same again.
Right.
Wizard of Oz.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's one of the craziest. If you want to get into that, that's one of the craziest coincidences in music
Love
history.
that.
When it goes to color and it's like ka-ching, like what?
But us, yeah, I mean, really, I just and just it's an anti-war song. Us and them talking about the opposing sides. You could interpret it so many ways.
Yeah.
And I will say my least favorite song here is Any Color You Like, because I don't think it adds much to the narrative, but it's still so great.
Such a good groove.
The instrumentals are in like canon with each other or something. But really, I mean, I'd be remiss to talk about this album, not mention the closing suite of Brain Damage and Eclipse, which they started. I mean, the fact that they're talking about like mental health issues and not in 1973. I mean, no one was talking about the lunatic is on the grass, you know, and just the laughing that comes in. I mean, just so beautiful. And then Eclipse, you know. Just the chorus coming in, the way all the motifs come back together is just absolutely mind-blowing. I think that this is maybe I think that there's been some concept albums that are probably a bit more articulate, like with their themes like To Pimp a Butterfly, but I think that this is the greatest concept album of all time. I think it's easily 10 out of 10 record. It's by far the best album of the 70s.
And probably the most iconic album cover. I mean, it's up there.
Oh my God.
I mean,
that and Abbey Road.
I mean, and I didn't even mention that for Wish You Were Here. I mean, that may be just as good. I mean, as a striking image. That Storm Thurgeson, is that the guy who did the cover art? Unreal, man.
Yeah, man getting burned by the deal. I mean, just so brilliant. And that ties right in themes with that album too. But yeah, I mean, I just absolutely adore this record, and it's one of, like, I know most people would agree that this is one of their favorite albums of all time, and I think that is why it is number one of the 70s, because it is the best album from the 1970s as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think this list came out great, man. I mean, there are a few quibbles that we have, and we are going to discuss that next week. We're doing a whole video just on the snubs that we think should have made the list, because I mean, there's just so many great albums in the 70s.
Best decade of
we really should have done a top 100, honestly, but you know, this happens, and but overall I'm very pleased. What about you, Giggens? Have you liked it overall? Or
it's been fun to listen to you guys. Yeah, the last sample of episodes. Your 60s one was great too, but the 70s are a really interesting time because bands definitely, you know, FM radio came out. So bands were like, oh, we can kind of make this longer now. People are actually buying albums instead of just singles. Like, bands grew their sound. Yeah. So it's really cool to see the ones who took off and got successful with it. And then it got completely ripped apart with the punk scene in the late 70s who got sick of all that stuff. But yeah, this top five, it's justified. Absolutely. Every album is an absolute classic. And yeah, Dark Side of the Moon is one of those things where, like, you never forget hearing that album for the first time.
No,
ever.
Yeah, it was an experience, and like every time, every time I put it on, because you can't put it on and not listen to the whole thing. Like, it's always an experience every time I hear it, and it always takes me back, and I'm like, good God, why don't I listen to this more often? Because it's just such an amazing album.
I don't put it on as much as I should. Maybe I play it once a year. I always skip Great Gig because I never want to hear that mystery bit of audio. I never want to hear it just in case. You guys know that thing?
Like, I don't think so. No.
Like, if you can hear this, you're dying. And I'm like, I don't want to hear that.
Oh, is that what that is? That little like whisper thing? Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, no.
Wow, that's creepy, man.
Skip over that one.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I totally get that then.
Yeah. You agree, I'm sure it's all BS, but it's still
right
because of the mystique of the band. Well, they probably did that. You know?
Yeah.
It was all intentional, guys.
Absolutely.
Ask Waters about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, great job, guys. Everyone who voted, thank you again so much, and be sure to start voting for the 80s now. Top 80 of the 80s, which is going to be super interesting.
To say the least. Do it.
Yeah, interesting is the key word. So, but yeah, get those in. If you can get us an 80, that's great. If you can only give us a top 10, that's fine too. But be sure to do it. The deadline is August the 8th. and we're going to start right into it shortly after, guys. So also, thank you again, Giggens. This has been a real treat, man. And again, check out this man's you'll be going down the rabbit hole for a long time on his channel, because he has so many amazing reviews of albums and a lot more to come. So
and so impassioned too. I just your enthusiasm is so infectious, man. And I think that's what drew me to your channel in the first place. Plus the fact that you're talking about stuff I love to begin with. But really, you guys got to check this guy out. He's great. I mean, what else can you say about Giggens, man?
Exactly.
Thanks, guys. That's incredibly sweet. Thank you so much. That means a lot. It's definitely something I have fun with, but I also take it seriously, because it's good to have a good document where people aren't just, it's so negative out there on the internet, and to have a space that's not super negative is, I feel like, rare. So
absolutely. Yeah, I feel like as YouTubers, especially in the music realm, I mean, we got to support each other the best that we can. And what better way than music lists? So
yeah.
So let's keep the love going, everybody. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you next week. Peace.